I moved into my Paris apartment during a late October evening. The air crisp with the promise of fall and the faint smell of roasted chestnuts drifting from the street vendors below. It was an old building, the kind you only find in the winding back streets of Le Marais, with high ceilings, creaking wooden floors, and faded frescoes that hinted at a grander past. The landlord was a pale, twitchy man who seemed more interested in collecting rent than explaining the history of the place. He handed me the keys with a muttered warning. Some say the walls have ears. Don't mind them. I laughed it off. I always laughed off things that didn't make sense until they became impossible to ignore. The first few nights were uneventful, aside from the occasional settling creaks of the apartment. I had unpacked quickly, too eager to start my new life in the city I'd always dreamed of. I worked as a translator, which meant late nights poring over French manuscripts, often sitting at the small oak table near the window. That's when I first noticed the whispers. At first, they were subtle, almost indistinguishable from the hum of the radiators. A soft murmur, just at the edge of perception, like someone talking in the hall outside. I pressed my ear to the wall, half expecting a neighbor to be making a phone call, but the hallway was empty. The voices didn't come from the hallway. They came from inside the walls themselves. "Is anyone there?" I asked one night, voice trembling slightly. Silence. Just my heartbeat, loud and sharp, echoing in the otherwise still apartment. I convinced myself it was stress. Moving cities, starting a new job, living alone for the first time in years. Stress, imagination. That was the logical explanation. But logic is a fragile thing when you're awake at 3 in the morning, and the whispers grow louder with each passing night. I began recording them, thinking I could capture evidence, something to explain to a skeptical friend. The first playback was faint, distorted, nearly imperceptible, fragments of words, a hiss that seemed to echo my own fears. But by the third night, the whispers had become clearer, insistent, forming words that chilled me to the bone. "They see you. They're inside." I froze, staring at the wall as though it were a living thing, breathing and waiting. The air seemed to thicken, the shadows stretching longer across the room. I tried reasoning with myself. Apartment ghosts are stories for tourists, not for rational adults. But then came a knocks. Soft at first, like someone tapping with a fingernail from the other side of the plaster. I ignored it, but it grew, sharp, deliberate, almost conversational, like the walls themselves were trying to speak to me. I banged back, tapping the wall in response, half laughing to hide the growing dread. The answer came almost immediately. 3 sharp raps, then a pause, then a slow, deliberate scraping as though something or someone was clawing at the inside of the apartment. Sleep became impossible. I would lie awake in my narrow bed, eyes wide, listening to the low, guttural hums that had now joined the whispers and knocks. I began talking back, asking questions in the dark. The voice, or voices, responded, forming broken sentences, mocking and taunting. "You're alone." "You're not." I called the landlord. His eyes darted nervously when I told him, and he said nothing for a long moment. Finally, he muttered, "You should not have asked the questions. Some walls hold grudges." I laughed nervously, thinking he meant it metaphorically. I wish I hadn't. The activity escalated. One night, I awoke to a new sound, footsteps pacing the living room. Heavy, deliberate, slow. I could hear the floorboards creak, the furniture shift, and then silence. I turned on every light, checking each corner, expecting some intruder. There was nothing, but the walls themselves seemed to thrum with anticipation. I moved my furniture against the walls, trying to block whatever was happening, but it didn't help. The whispers became voices again, clearer than ever. A cacophony now, overlapping. Male, female, childlike tones, all speaking at once in French and English. I couldn't make sense of them, but I could feel their malice, their impatience. Then came the shadows. I saw them first from the corner of my eye. Thin, elongated shapes crawling across the walls, blacker than the night outside, moving independently of light or source. I would blink, and they would vanish, leaving only the faint smell of damp plaster and decay. I tried friends, tried bringing people over. No one else could hear them. The whispers were only ever for me. The walls were speaking to me alone, and I began to notice, in my reflection in the window, that sometimes I was not alone. Faint shapes behind me, vanishing the instant I turned. I became obsessed, pacing, recording, writing down every phrase, every sound. It was a litany of despair. We were here first. You belong to us. They told us to wait. I stopped sleeping entirely, relying on black coffee and sheer panic to stay conscious. My work suffered, my health declined. One night, desperate, I tore open the plaster in the corner of the living room, thinking that maybe there was a hidden cavity, a nest of old wires or rats. What I found was neither. Just an empty void, but the whispers intensified, triumphant, mocking. They see you now. You cannot leave. I wanted to run. I wanted to throw my life away and escape this apartment forever. But every time I tried to pack, the walls would weep, a low, mournful sound like hundreds of voices crying in unison. It filled every corner, every crack, every room. My hands would shake, my ears would ring, and I would collapse, unable to move. I began to notice small things missing. Items I was sure I had placed on shelves or tables vanished, only to reappear days later in impossible positions, sometimes in front of the wall itself. The voices laughed when I pointed at them, a cruel, resonating sound that reverberated through the floorboards and into my chest. And then the letters began. Not emails, not notes I could trace. They simply appeared on my desk overnight. Long, jagged lines of text, smeared as though written by a trembling hand. One message chilled me to my core. You are our guest, but we are your hosts. Sleep, and we will show you. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My nights blurred into days, the Paris streets below carrying on obliviously. Friends stopped calling. I stopped answering. My reflection in the window no longer looked like me. It flickered, distorted, and sometimes there was someone else behind me, always watching, always smiling. One night, in utter exhaustion, I fell into a restless sleep. I dreamt, or perhaps it was more than a dream, that I was inside the walls themselves. Dark, narrow tunnels lined with the bones of old plaster and whispers screaming in every direction. Faces pressed against the walls, indistinct, hollow-eyed, whispering my name. I tried to scream, to run, but the walls themselves seemed to tighten around me. I awoke sweating, my apartment quiet, almost serene. For a moment, I thought perhaps I had imagined everything. But then I noticed a new message scrawled on the wall in condensation, as if formed from the very breath of the building itself. You are ours, forever. I fled Paris that morning. My apartment lease was terminated remotely by the landlord, who refused to speak to me when I called. I didn't intend to visit the old manor that summer. I was just passing through the French countryside, backpacking along the Loire Valley, chasing quiet roads and crumbling castles. But when I saw it, a massive stone house half hidden by overgrown ivy and twisted oak trees, I felt drawn in inexplicably. It looked abandoned, or at least long ignored. Windows dark, shutters hanging by rusty hinges, and the front gate sagging on its chains. I told myself I'd just take a few photos, a simple exploration. That's all it was supposed to be. The front door protested with a groan as I pushed it open. Dust swirled in the sunlight, streaming through the gaps in the roof. The smell hit me immediately: damp wood, mildew, and something else I couldn't name. Something faintly metallic, almost like rusted blood. I shrugged, ignoring the chill that ran down my spine. The manor had no furniture in the main hall, just the echo of my footsteps bouncing off stone walls. I wandered aimlessly, exploring the long corridors. Old paintings hung crooked, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow me. I joked aloud to myself, a weak attempt to shake the unease, but no sound returned. It was as though the house had swallowed my voice entirely. Then I found it, the cellar door. Small, low, almost hidden beneath a staircase in the corner of what had once been the kitchen. It was made of thick oak, reinforced with iron bands, and the handle was frozen in place with rust. I crouched down to inspect it and noticed a faint scratching from below. I froze. The sound wasn't strong, but deliberate, a slow, scraping rhythm like nails against stone. My heart pounded. I told myself it was rats or the wind moving through the cracks. But I knew deep down that it wasn't. I had to see. I forced the handle, pushing with all my strength. The door creaked open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. A foul, damp stench rose up, choking me slightly. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the thick black, and stepped down. The cellar was enormous, far larger than the house's footprint should have allowed. Stone walls stretched into the shadows, lined with shelves of broken jars, rotting wooden crates, and piles of debris. The scratching grew louder, echoing off the walls. I froze again, straining to see the source, but there was nothing, just shadows twisting in the corners of the beam. Then I heard it, whispering, soft at first, almost like the wind, but there was no wind. Words formed in the darkness, fragmented, broken French. Tu ne devrais pas être ici, pas encore. You shouldn't be here. Not yet. I felt my stomach drop. I wasn't alone. Something else was in the cellar. Something watching. Panic surged, but curiosity, stupid, dangerous curiosity, drove me further. I followed the sound deeper into the maze of stone. My flashlight flickered. I tapped it. Nothing. And then I saw it. Scratches on the wall, fresh, clawed into the stone. They weren't random. They formed words. Remain. I stumbled back. My breathing quickened. I wanted to leave, to run up the stairs, slam the door, and never look back. But then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate, echoing too perfectly for a person. They had no weight, yet they were undeniable. Hello. My voice cracked. Silence. Then a whisper, cold and close. Don't leave. I turned in a full circle. Nothing. Only shadow. Only that oppressive, suffocating dark that seemed to press in from every corner. My flashlight died again. Pitch black. Absolute. I fumbled for my phone, the tiny LED barely illuminating the immediate space. And then I saw it. A shape crouched in the far corner. Tall, impossibly thin, limbs bent at odd angles, staring at me with hollow, black pits where its eyes should have been. I screamed. It moved inhumanly fast. 1 second it was there, crouched in the corner. The next, it was closer. I stumbled backward, tripping over debris, crashing into a crate. I scrambled up, heart hammering, and ran blindly through the twisting corridors of the cellar. The whispering followed, growing louder, overlapping voices, speaking simultaneously, some French, some English, others I didn't recognize. Stay, we will find you. We have been waiting. I reached a dead end. My flashlight fell, bouncing across the stone floor, casting flickering shadows. And in that brief light, I saw dozens of them. Figures crouched against the walls, pressed in the corners, watching me with those hollow, endless eyes. My stomach turned to ice. One of them moved. Just one, but it was enough. It stepped forward, and the darkness seemed to cling to it, the shadows curling around its limbs like living smoke. The whispering intensified, now a roar of voices, demanding, accusing, laughing. I backed up, heart racing, searching desperately for an escape. My hand brushed against a door I hadn't noticed before, smaller, hidden behind crates. I wrenched it open and found a narrow passage leading further down. Ancient, crumbling stone stairs twisting into deeper darkness. I had no choice. I ran. Hours, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell, passed as I descended. The voices followed, always there, pressing against the walls, whispering, laughing, clawing at my mind. The passage narrowed. The air grew colder, wetter, smelling of decay, and something else, something alive. And then I reached it, the heart of the cellar, a vast cavernous space, walls slick with moisture, and at the center, a pit that seemed to descend into endless black. The whispers became coherent, chanting now, a single phrase repeated over and over. Join us, join us, join us. I could see faces pressed against the pit walls, hundreds of them, pale and contorted, silent yet screaming in some internal torment. My hands shook as I realized they were the previous explorers, the curious, the foolish, the ones who had come before me. Their eyes, hollow, now fixed on me, pleading and accusing simultaneously. And then I felt it, a cold hand on my shoulder. Not a shadow, not a figure, but something real. I spun around, but nothing was there. Only the whispers, now a deafening roar in my mind. Do not resist. You are ours. I ran blindly up the stairs, tripping, falling, scraping my hands on stone, until I burst through the cellar door into the overgrown garden. The sun was setting. Birds called somewhere in the distance. The manor stood silent, imposing, almost peaceful. I ran to the nearest village, gasping, shaking, unable to speak coherently. I never returned. I never even told anyone exactly where it was, for fear they might go looking, curiosity killing them as it almost killed me. But that was not the end. A week later, I found a scratch on my arm, small, thin, almost unnoticeable, but deep enough to leave a mark. Alongside it, in tiny, jagged letters etched into my skin, "We are here." I have tried to hide it, tried to forget it, but at night, when the world is quiet, I hear the whispers again. They are patient. They are waiting. They know I remember. And I know, without a doubt, that they will come for me again. I have nightmares always of that pit, of the faces, of the figures with hollow eyes pressing through the shadows, just beyond my reach. And I know this is not the end. Wherever I go, whatever I do, the cellar door waits. Somewhere, waiting for the next curious soul. Waiting for me. I'd always been drawn to the sea. The way it could both calm and terrify, the endless horizon that seemed to stretch beyond time itself. So when I accepted the caretaker position at the abandoned lighthouse on the northern coast of Brittany, I thought it would be a dream come true. The pay was meager, the work minimal, but I had the entire coastline to myself. Or so I thought. The lighthouse was ancient, a stone sentinel perched atop jagged cliffs. Waves pounded relentlessly against the rocks below, spraying salt water that stung my face as I approached. The door was heavy, iron-bound, and groaned as I pushed it open. Inside, dust coated the floors and walls, and the smell of mildew and seaweed filled the air. It was quiet, too quiet, but I told myself that was part of the charm. The first few days passed uneventfully. I cleaned, polished the lenses of the lighthouse, and explored the surrounding cliffs. I would sit in the spiral staircase, reading by the light of my lantern, feeling the wind press against the thick walls. Occasionally, I would hear a faint murmur, a whisper of sound that could have been the wind. I ignored it. It had to be the wind. Then came a knocks. It was subtle at first, 3 light raps on the metal railing of the stairs. I froze, thinking it might be a bird or some small animal caught inside. But as I strained my ears, I realized the sound had a pattern, deliberate, almost communicative. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" No answer. Only the waves crashing against the rocks and the faint hiss of the wind. That night, I woke to a sound I could not explain, a soft whisper, almost imperceptible, coming from the walls themselves. My heart pounded as I strained to hear. The voice was human, but distorted, as if someone were speaking through water. "Don't leave, stay." I froze. My rational mind screamed at me. There was no one here, only me and the sea, but the voice was unmistakable. I grabbed my flashlight and combed the lighthouse, but it was empty. Over the next few days, the whispers grew more insistent. They spoke in fragmented sentences, sometimes in French, sometimes in English. They mimicked my voice, called my name, laughed softly when I tried to ignore them. I began recording the sounds, hoping to capture evidence. On playback, the whispers were clear, malevolent, layered, hundreds of voices overlapping, almost singing. The lighthouse itself seemed to respond. The lights in the stairwell flickered without reason. Doors I had closed would be open the next morning. Objects would shift places. I began to feel watched, even in the emptiest rooms. Shadows moved independently of light, curling along the walls, just at the corner of my vision. One evening, I decided to explore the storage basement beneath the lighthouse. It was dark, damp, and smelled of rot. As I descended the narrow staircase, I noticed scratches on the walls, fresh, deep like claws. I shivered, telling myself it was rats, or maybe the remnants of some previous caretaker. But when I reached the bottom, I found something else. A small, metal hatch, partially hidden beneath crates of rusted tools. From beneath it came the whispers, louder now, urgent, almost pleading. "Open! Let us in, we've been waiting." I froze, my hand hovering over the cold metal. The rational part of me screamed to leave, to run, but some morbid curiosity, some magnetic pull, made me pry it open. The hatch led to a dark, narrow tunnel, carved into the rock beneath the lighthouse. A foul stench rose from within. I stepped inside, flashlight trembling in my hand. The tunnel was long, twisting, and claustrophobic. The walls were slick with moisture, and the whispers followed me, echoing from every direction. They spoke of old tragedies, lost sailors, and forgotten lives. I stumbled over broken chains and rusted anchors, my mind reeling from the voices' tales. And then I saw them, figures pressed against the rock walls, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes. They were the ones the whispers had spoken of, souls trapped, waiting. One of them stepped forward, and I could see its face clearly, hollow, twisted, and grinning, its mouth opening impossibly wide. The whispers became a chorus, chanting my name, urging me to join them. I ran, turning corners blindly, the figures following, moving impossibly fast, always just behind me. The tunnel seemed endless, twisting into deeper darkness. My flashlight flickered, casting grotesque shadows. I could feel the walls themselves closing in, squeezing me, pushing me toward the pit of the lighthouse's foundation. I reached a small chamber, and in the center, a shallow pool of black water reflected the flickering light. The whispers coalesced into a single command: enter or remain forever. I could not resist. Something, a compulsion I could not explain, pulled me toward the water. As I stared into it, I saw my own reflection, but distorted, smiling in a way I could not. I screamed and stumbled backward, falling into the cold pool. The water was icy alive. It surged around me, carrying voices, faces, hands that clawed at my skin, trying to pull me under. I thrashed, finally breaking free, scrambling out of the chamber. But when I looked back, the water had vanished. The tunnel was empty, silent. Only the echo of my panicked breathing remained. I fled the lighthouse, running down the cliffside, waves crashing below. By morning, I had reached the nearest village, shaking, drenched, unable to speak coherently. I tried to tell the locals about the lighthouse, about the voices, the tunnel, the figures, but they only shook their heads. "No one has lived there for decades," they said. "It's just a lighthouse. Empty." I tried to move on, to forget, but the whispers followed me. At night, I hear them, faint but insistent, through the walls of my new apartment, my hotel rooms, even when I'm out walking in the city. They call my name, telling me to return, to go back to the lighthouse. And I know, deep down I know they are waiting, patient, immortal. I have dreams of the tunnel, the water, the hollow-eyed figures pressing against the stone. I wake in cold sweat, convinced that I am being dragged back, step by step, into that darkness. I have moved countless times, but the whispers find me, relentless. Sometimes late at night, I swear I feel icy fingers brushing against my skin, pulling me toward some unseen door, toward that black water, toward the lighthouse that will never release me. One night, I dreamt of my own reflection again, distorted, smiling, whispering my name. And I understood the truth. The lighthouse does not let go. It waits. It chooses. And one day, it will come for me completely. Until then, the whispers remain patient, persistent, and terrifyingly familiar.